The wind cut through the November night like frozen glass, and Tessa Washington's fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago. She stood at the bus stop on 8th Avenue, her thin red jacket doing almost nothing against the cold that seemed to reach right into her bones. The city lights blurred through the fog of her breath as she checked her phone for the third time. The bus was running late. Again. That's when she noticed him. A man sat on the metal bench, hunched forward with his arms wrapped around himself. He wore what looked like an expensive charcoal suit, but no coat, no scarf, no gloves. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and even in the dim streetlight she could see him shaking. Not the casual shiver of someone slightly cold, but the deep, bone-rattling tremors of someone who had been out in this weather far too long. Tessa's mother had taught her to notice people, to see when someone needed help. And this man clearly needed help. She walked closer, her worn sneakers quiet on the concrete. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you okay?" The man looked up and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He had kind eyes, she thought, even though they looked tired. Maybe he was in his early 30s, with a strong jaw and the sort of features that belonged in a magazine. But right now those features were pale with cold. I'll be fine," he managed through chattering teeth. "Just waiting for a cab." Tessa glanced at the empty street. No cabs in sight. No cars at all, really. This neighborhood didn't see much traffic after 9 at night. "You're freezing," she said, stating the obvious. She didn't think about it for more than a second. Didn't calculate or hesitate. She simply unzipped her red jacket and held it out to him. "Here. Take this." The man stared at the jacket like she just offered him a bar of gold. "I can't, you'll be cold." "I have a sweater on," Tessa said, which was true even if the green sweater was thin and had a small hole near the hem. "You have nothing. Please, take it." Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like wonder. Slowly he reached out and took the jacket. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion that seemed about more than just the cold. "Thank you so much." "You're welcome." Tessa smiled, even though she immediately felt the wind bite harder without her jacket's protection. She stepped back to give him space. He stood, pulling the jacket on. It was too small for his broad shoulders, but he zipped it up anyway and the shaking gradually began to ease. "I'm Julian," he said. "Julian Hartley. Tessa Washington." They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers at a bus stop, one wearing a jacket that didn't fit, the other pretending she wasn't cold. Then headlights appeared and a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. "That's my ride," Julian said, looking almost reluctant. He started to take off the jacket. "Keep it," Tessa said quickly. "Really? Just stay warm." "I'll return it to you," he said, his gaze intense. "I promise." "It's okay, you don't have to." "I want to." He pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number? So I can return the jacket." Tessa hesitated, but something about his earnest expression made her nod. She gave him her number and he typed it carefully into his phone. "Thank you, Tessa Washington," he said one more time. Then he got into the car and it drove away into the night, taking her red jacket with it. The bus finally arrived 10 minutes later. As Tessa climbed aboard and found a seat by the window, she rubbed her arms against the cold and wondered if she'd ever see that jacket again. Or the man named Julian Hartley who had looked at her like she'd given him something far more valuable than a piece of clothing. She had no idea that this single moment of kindness, this simple choice to help a stranger, would change the entire course of her life. She couldn't know that the man she'd just met wasn't just anyone, but someone who had the power to make dreams come true. All she knew was that someone had needed help, and she had given what she could. That was enough. Or at least she thought it was. Have you ever helped a stranger without knowing how much that one act of kindness would mean to them? What if that simple choice changed everything? If this story touches your heart, subscribe to see how Tessa's life transforms in ways she never imagined. Comment below. Would you have given away your jacket to a stranger on a cold night? Tessa pulled her apartment door shut behind her and tested the lock twice, the way she always did. The building wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was what she could afford on a bookstore clerk's salary. The hallway smelled like someone's cooking, a mix of spices and fried food that made her stomach rumble. She'd grabbed something quick on the way home from her shift. The bookstore where she worked, Chapter and Verse, sat in a better part of town. It took 40 minutes by bus to get there, but Tessa didn't mind. She loved books. Loved the way they smelled, the way they felt in her hands, the way they opened up entire worlds. Even if she was just organizing shelves and ringing up purchases, she felt lucky to work somewhere surrounded by stories. She'd been at the job for 2 years now, ever since she'd graduated from community college with an associate degree in English. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Her mother had been so proud at graduation, crying and taking pictures and telling everyone that her daughter was going to do amazing things. Tessa wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that someday she'd do more than just work retail and live paycheck to paycheck. But for now, this was her life and she tried to be grateful for what she had. The bus stop was only 2 blocks from her apartment. She walked quickly, her hands shoved in her jacket pockets, her breath making clouds in the cold air. November had arrived with a vengeance this year, bringing temperatures that felt more like January. The forecast said snow might come early. At the bus stop, the digital sign said her bus would arrive in 15 minutes. Tessa settled in to wait, watching a few other people hurry past on the sidewalk. A woman walking 2 small dogs. A teenager with headphones on, nodding to music only he could hear. An older man carrying a grocery bag. That's when she first noticed Julian, though she didn't know his name yet. He was sitting on the bench and something about the way he held himself caught her attention. He looked wrong somehow. Out of place. It took her a moment to realize why. His suit was expensive. Really expensive. The kind of thing she saw on businessmen in the financial district when she occasionally had errands downtown. But he had no coat, and he was shaking like a leaf in a storm. Tessa moved closer, concerned. Something must have happened. Maybe he'd been robbed. Maybe his coat had been stolen. Whatever the reason, he was clearly in trouble. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle. "Are you okay?" When he looked up at her, she felt a strange jolt. His eyes were gray, like clouds before rain, and they held a kind of weariness that seemed deeper than just physical exhaustion. But there was something kind in them too. Something that made her want to help. I'll be fine," he said, but his teeth chattered so hard she could hear them click together. "Just waiting for a cab." Tessa looked at the empty street and frowned. This neighborhood didn't get many cabs. If he was waiting for one, he might be here for a very long time. "You're freezing," she said. She knew she should probably just mind her own business. Keep to herself. That's what most people did in the city. But her mother's voice echoed in her head. "If you can help someone, Tessa, you help them. That's what good people do." She unzipped her red jacket. It was her favorite jacket, bought on sale last year from a thrift store. She'd worn it through last winter and into this one. It had kept her warm through dozens of cold days. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "Take this." He stared at the jacket like she'd offered him something impossible. "I can't," he protested, though his whole body was still trembling. "You'll be cold." "I have a sweater on," Tessa said. Her green sweater was thin, sure, but it was something. "You have nothing. Please, take it." She watched the internal battle play out on his face. He clearly wanted to refuse. Pride maybe. Or not wanting to take from someone who obviously had less than him. But the cold was winning, and finally he reached out with shaking hands and accepted the jacket. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you so much." As he pulled on the jacket, Tessa felt the immediate bite of the wind without its protection. She suppressed a shiver and smiled instead. "You're welcome." "I'm Julian," he said, standing up. Even in her jacket, which was obviously too small for his frame, he seemed to carry himself with a certain grace. "Julian Hartley. Tessa Washington." She offered her hand and he shook it. His grip was firm but careful, as if he was very aware of his own strength. They stood there for a moment, and Tessa felt oddly comfortable despite the awkward situation. There was something about him that put her at ease. Maybe it was the genuine gratitude in his eyes. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she was someone worth really seeing. Headlights swept across them and a sleek black car pulled smoothly to the curb. The kind of car Tessa had only seen in movies. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a man in a neat suit who looked at Julian with obvious relief. "Mr. Hartley, I've been looking everywhere for you." Julian nodded but turned back to Tessa. He started to unzip the jacket. "Keep it," she said quickly. "Really? Just stay warm." "I'll return it to you," he said firmly. "I promise. I need to." "It's okay, you don't have to." "I want to." He pulled out his phone, the kind that cost more than she made in a month. "Can I get your number? So I can return the jacket." Tessa hesitated. Her practical side said this was weird. Said she should just let him keep the jacket and move on with her life. But something made her agree. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like this mattered. Like she mattered. She gave him her number and he typed it in carefully, double-checking each digit. "Thank you, Tessa Washington," he said, his voice warm despite the cold night. "You have no idea what this means to me." Then he was in the car and it was pulling away, and Tessa was alone at the bus stop again, colder now without her jacket but feeling strangely warm inside. The bus finally came, running 20 minutes late. Tessa climbed aboard, paid her fare, and found a seat near the back. She watched the city lights blur past the window and thought about gray eyes and expensive suits and the way a stranger had looked at her like she'd done something extraordinary. All she'd done was offer a jacket to someone who was cold. That was basic human decency. That was what anyone should do. But as the bus carried her home through the November night, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed. Something important had shifted in the universe, though she couldn't say what or how. She pulled out her phone and looked at her contact list, wondering if he'd really call. Wondering if she'd ever see Julian Hartley again. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that Julian had already decided that this woman who gave away her jacket to a stranger was someone rare. Someone special. Someone he wanted to know better. And when Julian Hartley decided something, he made it happen. 3 days passed, and Tessa had almost convinced herself that the bus stop encounter had been a dream. Or if not a dream, then just one of those random city moments that happen and then fade away. She told her best friend Candace about it during their weekly phone call, and Candace had laughed. "Girl, you gave your jacket to a strange man? What if he was a serial killer?" "He wasn't a serial killer," Tessa had said, rolling her eyes even though Candace couldn't see her. "He was just cold." "Still. You're too nice for this world, Tessa." Maybe she was. But she couldn't imagine being any other way. It was Thursday afternoon and the bookstore was quiet. Thursdays were always slow. Tessa had already reorganized the new arrivals display twice and was considering rearranging the classics section just to have something to do when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up from the register and felt her heart do a strange skip. Julian Hartley stood in the doorway, looking very different from the shivering man at the bus stop. He wore dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt under a black wool coat. His hair was neat, his face clean-shaven. He looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog. And he was holding her red jacket. "Hi," he said, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. "I was hoping you'd be here." Tessa came around the counter, suddenly very aware that she was wearing her work clothes, black pants and a maroon polo shirt with the bookstore's logo. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She probably had dust on her from shelving books all morning. "Hi," she managed. "You found me." "I did." He walked toward her, extending the jacket. "I wanted to return this. And to thank you properly." Tessa took the jacket, noticing it had been cleaned. It smelled like fresh laundry and looked better than it had when she'd first bought it. "You didn't have to clean it." "I wanted to." He glanced around the bookstore, taking in the shelves packed with books, the cozy reading nook by the window, the soft lighting. "This is a beautiful store." "Thank you. I love working here." Tessa folded the jacket over her arm. "So, how did you find me? You mentioned you worked at a bookstore when we were talking that night. There are only so many bookstores in the city, and this one is called Chapter and Verse, which sounds like something someone who loves books would work at." He smiled, a bit sheepish. "I hope that's not creepy." "It's resourceful," Tessa said and found herself smiling back. "Good." Julian looked relieved. "Listen, I know this might be forward, but would you let me buy you coffee? As a thank you?" Tessa glanced at the clock. Her shift ended in 20 minutes and her boss, Mr. Peterson, was in the back office. She could ask to leave a bit early. "I'd like that," she said, making a decision. "Let me just check with my boss." Mr. Peterson, a kind man in his 60s who had owned the store for 30 years, waved her off with a smile. Go. We're dead anyway. Have fun." 10 minutes later, Tessa and Julian sat in the coffee shop 2 doors down from the bookstore. The cafe, called Brew Haven, was one of Tessa's favorite places. It had mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the best lattes in the neighborhood. Julian insisted on paying and Tessa accepted with a thank you. He got a black coffee. She ordered her usual, a vanilla latte with extra foam. They settled at a table by the window and for a moment neither spoke. Then Julian said, "Tell me about yourself, Tessa Washington." "What should I know?" Tessa laughed, caught off guard by the direct question. "That's a big question." "Start small then. What's your favorite book?" That was easy. Pride and Prejudice. I've read it maybe 10 times. Jane Austen. Julian nodded approvingly. I read it in college. Elizabeth Bennet is quite a character. She's the best, Tessa agreed. She's smart and funny and she doesn't take any nonsense from anyone. I always wished I could be more like her. I think you might be already, Julian said quietly. Tessa felt her cheeks warm. What about you? What's your favorite book? The Count of Monte Cristo. I read it when I was 16 and I couldn't put it down. They talked about books for a while and Tessa found herself relaxing. Julian was easy to talk to. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and he asked questions that showed he cared about her answers. It had been a long time since someone had paid attention to her like this. "So what do you do?" Tessa asked finally. "For work, I mean." Julian's expression shifted slightly. "I work in business. Technology and real estate mostly." "That sounds interesting." "It can be." He took a sip of his coffee. "What about you? Is working at the bookstore your dream job?" Tessa considered the question. "I love the bookstore. But my real dream." She hesitated. Did she really want to share this with someone she barely knew? "Tell me," Julian encouraged gently. "I want to open a community library. Not just any library, but one that serves neighborhoods that don't have good access to books. A place where kids can come after school to read and do homework. Where adults can take classes or join book clubs. A place that brings people together." Julian leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "That's a beautiful dream." "It's probably impossible," Tessa said with a self-conscious laugh. "Libraries cost money. Real money. And I'm just a bookstore clerk who can barely afford her rent." "Nothing is impossible," Julian said firmly. "Dreams are just plans that haven't been put into action yet." Something about the way he said it made Tessa believe him. Made her think that maybe, just maybe, impossible things could happen. They talked until their coffees were empty and the afternoon light had shifted to early evening. Julian asked about her family, and Tessa told him about her mother who worked as a nurse and had raised Tessa alone after her father died when she was 5. She asked about his family and he spoke briefly about parents who had high expectations and a younger sister who made him laugh. Finally, Julian glanced at his watch. "I should let you go. I'm sure you have things to do." "I should get home," Tessa agreed, though part of her didn't want this to end. They stood and walked to the door together. Outside, the November air was cold but not as bitter as it had been that night at the bus stop. "Can I see you again?" Julian asked. "Maybe dinner next time?" Tessa felt that flutter in her chest again. "I'd like that." "Saturday night? I could pick you up at 7. "Okay." She gave him her address and he typed it into his phone. "Great." He smiled and it transformed his whole face. "I'm really glad I met you, Tessa." "Me too." She watched him walk to where a car was waiting. Not the same black car from before but a silver one. He waved before getting in and Tessa waved back. As she rode the bus home, her red jacket in her lap, Tessa couldn't stop smiling. She didn't know what was happening but it felt good. It felt right. When she got home, Candace called immediately as if she had a sixth sense. "Well?" her friend demanded. "How was your day?" "You're never going to believe this," Tessa said and proceeded to tell her everything. Candace was silent for a moment when she finished. Then, "Tessa, this sounds like something out of a movie." "I know. What if he's really rich or something?" "He's probably just a normal guy," Tessa said, though she remembered the expensive suit, the nice cars, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. "Girl, normal guys don't have drivers," Candace pointed out. "But whatever. As long as he's nice to you, I'm happy. You deserve someone nice." That night, lying in bed, Tessa thought about Julian's question. "Tell me about yourself. What should I know?" She had told him about books and her mother and her dream of a community library. But she hadn't told him about the nights she lay awake worrying about money. About how she sometimes skipped dinner to make sure she could pay all her bills. About how lonely it felt sometimes, living in a city surrounded by millions of people. Maybe those were things you didn't tell someone on a first coffee date. Maybe those were things you saved for later if there was a later. But something told Tessa there would be a later. Something about the way Julian had looked at her, like she was someone worth knowing. She fell asleep thinking about gray eyes and easy conversation and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine. Tessa woke early, too excited to sleep in. She had a date tonight. An actual date with a man who seemed genuinely interested in her. It felt surreal. She spent the morning cleaning her small apartment, doing laundry and trying to decide what to wear. Her wardrobe wasn't extensive. Most of her clothes were practical. Work clothes, comfortable home clothes, a few pieces for the rare occasion she went out. She finally settled on a green dress she'd bought on sale last year. It was simple but flattering, hitting just above her knees. She'd wear it with her black flats and her one nice coat. Her phone buzzed around noon. A text from an unknown number. "Hi Tessa, it's Julian. Looking forward to tonight. I'll pick you up at 7. She texted back, "Me too. See you then." At 3 o'clock her phone rang. Her landlord, Mr. Chin. Miss Washington, he said in his accented English. I need to tell you something about your rent. Tessa's heart sank. Please don't let it be an increase. She could barely afford what she paid now. I've been thinking, Mr. Chin continued. You've been a good tenant. Always pay on time. Always respectful. So I'm reducing your rent by $200 a month. Tessa almost dropped her phone. I'm sorry, did you say reducing? Yes. Starting next month. You're a good person, Miss Washington. I want to help. After she hung up, Tessa sat on her couch in stunned silence. $200 a month. That was money she could save. Money she could use for emergencies or maybe even put toward her dream. She wanted to cry with relief. That evening, she was ready by 6:30, pacing her small apartment and checking her appearance in the mirror every few minutes. The green dress looked good. Her hair, usually in a ponytail, hung loose around her shoulders. She'd put on a little makeup, nothing dramatic, just enough to feel put together. At exactly 7, her buzzer rang. It's Julian, came his voice through the intercom. I'll be right down, she said, grabbing her coat and purse. He was waiting in the lobby, and when he saw her, his face lit up. You look beautiful. Thank you. Tessa felt her cheeks warm. You look nice too. He wore dark slacks and a blue sweater that matched his eyes. He offered his arm and she took it, feeling like she'd stepped into a different life. The car waiting outside was the silver one from before. The driver opened the back door, and Julian helped her in before sliding in beside her. Where are we going? Tessa asked. There's a restaurant I think you'll like. Italian food. Is that okay? I love Italian food. The restaurant was called Rossini's in a part of town Tessa rarely visited. It had white tablecloths, soft lighting, and waiters in crisp white shirts. The kind of place she'd walked past but never entered. They were seated at a table by the window with a view of the city lights. A waiter appeared immediately, offering menus and water. Would you like wine? Julian asked. Just water is fine, Tessa said. She didn't drink much and she wanted to remember every moment of this evening. They ordered. Tessa chose pasta with marinara sauce. Julian ordered chicken parmesan. When the food arrived, it was delicious. Better than anything Tessa had tasted in a long time. They talked easily, like they'd known each other for years instead of days. Julian asked about her week, and she told him about the funny customer who'd come into the bookstore looking for a book but couldn't remember the title, author, or even what it was about. I spent an hour helping him and we finally figured out he was thinking of a movie, not a book. Julian laughed, the sound warm and genuine. She asked about his week and he talked about meetings and decisions and problems that needed solving. He made it sound less exciting than it probably was, she thought. The strangest thing happened today, Tessa said between bites of pasta. My landlord called to tell me he's reducing my rent. That is strange, Julian agreed. But good strange. Very good strange. I almost couldn't believe it. Things like that don't happen to me. Maybe your luck is changing, Julian said softly. After dinner they walked along the nearby park. November evening was cold but not unbearably so. Tessa pulled her coat tighter and Julian stayed close as if to block the wind. I have to be honest with you, Julian said suddenly. That night at the bus stop I was having the worst day of my life. Everything had gone wrong. I'd lost something important, made a mistake that cost my company a lot of money. I was questioning everything I'd built. And then you appeared and offered me your jacket, and it reminded me that there are still good people in the world. That kindness still exists. Tessa stopped walking and turned to face him. I'm glad I could help. You did more than help. Julian's gray eyes were serious. You reminded me why I do what I do. Why I started my company in the first place. It wasn't for money or power. It was to make things better. To help people. I'd forgotten that somewhere along the way. What kind of company do you have? Tessa asked. Technology and real estate. We develop software for education and build affordable housing. He smiled slightly. I promise I'm not being deliberately vague. I like that you don't know who I am. That you're here because you want to be, not because of what I can offer. I am here because I want to be, Tessa confirmed. You're easy to talk to. And you listen. That's rare. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their footsteps echoing on the path. Then Julian said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Your dream about the community library. Have you done anything to make it happen? Tessa sighed. Not really. I've thought about it a lot. Planned it in my head. But actually doing it requires money I don't have and connections I don't have. It feels like something I can dream about but never actually do. What if I told you that dreams can become real if you're willing to accept help? What do you mean? Julian stopped walking and turned to face her fully. I want to help you. With your library. I want to make it happen. Tessa's breath caught. Julian, that's too much. Why? He asked simply. I have resources. You have a vision that could help a lot of people. Why shouldn't we work together? Because we barely know each other. Because it's too generous. Because you're not used to accepting help, Julian finished. I understand that. I was raised the same way. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Never take handouts. But here's what I've learned. Accepting help isn't weak. It's wise. And giving help isn't charity. It's investment in making the world better. Tessa wanted to argue. Wanted to say it was too much, too fast, too everything. But she heard her mother's voice in her head. When someone offers you a hand up, Tessa, you take it. Pride doesn't feed your soul. Are you serious? She asked quietly. Completely serious. Then, Tessa took a deep breath. Then yes, thank you. I accept your help. With gratitude. Julian's face broke into a huge smile. Good. We'll start planning next week. As they walked back to his car, Tessa felt like she was floating. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. But Julian's hand was warm in hers, and the city lights sparkled around them, and it was real. It was actually real. He drove her home, walking her to her building's door like a gentleman from another era. Thank you for tonight, Tessa said. For dinner and the walk and everything. Thank you for saying yes. To the date and to the library. He leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to move away if she wanted. But she didn't want to. She leaned in too, and their lips met in a gentle kiss that made her heart race. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Good night, Tessa. Good night, Julian. She watched him drive away before going inside. In her apartment, she leaned against the door and let herself process everything that had just happened. A wonderful date. A perfect kiss. And a billionaire who wanted to help her build a library. Except she didn't know he was a billionaire yet. That revelation was still to come. What Tessa knew was that her life was changing. That kindness and hope and the simple act of offering a jacket on a cold night had opened a door to something beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, Tessa let herself believe that good things could happen. That dreams could come true. That maybe she deserved all of this. She fell asleep that night with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. The following Monday, Tessa arrived at work still riding the high of Saturday night. Candace had called her Sunday morning demanding every detail, and Tessa had happily provided them. He kissed you. Candace had squealed. And he wants to help you build a library? Girl, who is this man? I don't know exactly, Tessa had admitted. He's in business. Technology and real estate. You need to Google him. That feels weird. Tessa. Google him. But Tessa hadn't. Part of her wanted to preserve the magic of not knowing. Of just enjoying Julian for who he was in her presence, not who the internet said he was. That resolve lasted until Tuesday afternoon when a woman came into the bookstore dressed in an expensive business suit, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Are you Tessa Washington? The woman asked. Yes, Tessa said cautiously. Can I help you? The woman smiled warmly. I'm Rebecca Cole. I work for Hartley Industries. Julian asked me to come speak with you about the library project. Tessa blinked. Hartley Industries? Yes. I'm the community development director. Julian said you have a vision for a community library, and he'd like to discuss the specifics with you. Are you free Thursday evening? Yes, I think so. Tessa's mind was racing. Hartley Industries. Julian's last name was Hartley. Was the company named after him? Or was it a family business? Wonderful. Julian will pick you up at 6. He wanted me to give you these. Rebecca handed her a folder. These are some preliminary plans and options for locations. Take a look and see what speaks to you. After Rebecca left, Tessa opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were professional architectural drawings, property listings in her neighborhood, and budget breakdowns. This wasn't a casual offer of help. This was serious. This was real. At the top of one page she saw the letterhead, Hartley Industries with Julian Hartley listed as CEO. Tessa pulled out her phone and did what she should have done days ago. She Googled Julian Hartley. The results made her head spin. Julian Hartley, 34, CEO of Hartley Industries, one of the fastest-growing technology and real estate companies in the country. Net worth estimated at $2.3 billion. Named one of Forbes 30 under 30 billion. With AB. Tessa sat down heavily on the stool behind the counter. The man she'd given her jacket to wasn't just wealthy. He was a billionaire. One of those people she read about in magazines. Someone so far out of her league they might as well live on different planets. And he'd kissed her. And wanted to help her build a library. She felt nauseous. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he let her think he was just a regular person? Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Rebecca said she stopped by. I hope the plans look good. I should have told you who I was sooner, but I was enjoying just being Julian with you. Can we talk Thursday? Tessa stared at the text for a long moment. Then she typed back, yes. Thursday at 6. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Tessa told Candace everything, and her friend was torn between excitement and concern. On one hand, billionaire boyfriend goals, Candace said. On the other hand, why did he lie to you? He didn't exactly lie, Tessa said. He just didn't tell me everything. Same difference. But was it? Tessa kept thinking about their conversations. Julian had never pretended to be poor. He just never mentioned being extraordinarily rich. And he'd said he liked that she didn't know who he was. That she was there because of him, not his money. She could understand that, actually. If she were rich and famous, wouldn't she want someone to like her for herself? Thursday evening came. Tessa wore the same green dress because it was still her nicest outfit. She waited in her apartment, more nervous than she'd been for their first date. At 6 sharp, her buzzer rang. Julian looked anxious when she came downstairs. Hi. Hi. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Julian said, Can we go somewhere to talk? Somewhere private? Tessa nodded. They got into his car, and he directed the driver to take them to what turned out to be his penthouse apartment downtown. The elevator opened directly into his home. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out below. The furniture was modern and expensive-looking but somehow still comfortable. Art hung on the walls, the kind that probably cost more than Tessa made in a year. Wow, she said softly. Yeah. Julian rubbed the back of his neck. I should have prepared you better. Should have told you sooner. Why didn't you? He walked to the windows looking out at the city. That night at the bus stop, I'd just come from the worst business meeting of my life. I'd made a decision that cost my company millions. I'd disappointed people who trusted me. I'd walked out of the building without my coat because I needed air, needed to think, and I just kept walking until I ended up at that bus stop miles from my office. Tessa moved to stand beside him. And then I showed up. And then you showed up. And you offered me your jacket without knowing who I was or what I could give you in return. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. Do you know how rare that is in my world? I think kindness is rare everywhere, Tessa said. Maybe. But in my world, every interaction comes with an agenda. People want something from me. Investment money. Business connections. Social status. But you just wanted me to be warm. Tessa felt her defenses softening. I get that. I do. But Julian, you're a billionaire. That's a pretty big thing to not mention. I know. I'm sorry. I should have told you before Saturday. Before I kissed you. He turned to face her. But I was selfish. I wanted a few more days of just being Julian. Not Julian Hartley, CO. Not the guy everyone wants something from. Just Julian, talking to a beautiful woman who made him laugh and think and feel hopeful again. What do you want from me now? Tessa asked. Honestly? I want to help you build your library. I want to see your dream become real. And I want to keep seeing you if you'll let me. But Tessa, I need you to understand something important. What? I'm not offering to help you because I'm expecting something in return. I'm not trying to buy your affection or impress you. I'm offering because your vision is beautiful and important, and because I have the resources to make it happen. Please don't say no because of pride or fear or because you think you don't deserve it. Tessa thought about her mother's words again. Accept help when it's offered. Accept kindness. My mom used to say that when someone offers you a hand up, you take it, she said slowly. She said pride doesn't feed your soul. Your mom sounds like a wise woman. She is. Tessa took a deep breath. Okay. Yes. Let's build the library together. And yes, I want to keep seeing you too. Julian's relief was visible. Thank you. But Julian? No more secrets. If we're doing this, being in each other's lives, I need you to be honest with me. About everything. Deal. He held out his hand and she shook it. Then they both laughed at the formality of it and the tension broke. Are you hungry? Julian asked. I can order food. Or I can cook, though I should warn you my cooking skills are limited. You cook. I make a decent grilled cheese sandwich. Tessa grinned. That sounds perfect. They ended up in his enormous kitchen, and Julian proved that his grilled cheese skills were indeed decent. They ate at the counter talking about the library plans, and Tessa felt the ease between them returning. "I've been thinking about locations," Julian said, pulling up a map on his tablet. "There are 3 properties in your neighborhood that could work. This one used to be a community center. This one was a school. And this one is just an empty lot where we could build from scratch." Tessa studied the options, her excitement growing. "The old community center. That one has good bones. And it's right in the heart of the neighborhood where kids could walk there safely. I thought you'd like that one." Julian made a note. "We can schedule a tour for this weekend if you're free." "I'm free." They spent the next hour going through details. Budget. Timeline. Programs they could offer. Julian took notes, asked questions, and treated her ideas with the seriousness they deserved. "You know what I love about this?" he said at one point. "What?" "You're not intimidated by any of this. You have a vision, and you're not backing down from it just because the numbers are big or the scope is large." "Should I be intimidated?" Tessa asked. "Most people would be. But you see the end result. The kids reading books. The adults learning new skills. The community coming together. You see the why behind the how, and that's what makes you special." As the evening wound down, Julian called his driver to take Tessa home. At her door he kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter. "Thank you for giving me another chance," he said. "Thank you for being honest. Always. From now on, always." That night, lying in bed, Tessa processed everything. Julian was a billionaire. He wanted to build her library. He wanted to be with her. It was overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at once. But beneath all the complicated feelings was something simple and true. Julian was a good person. Wealth hadn't made him arrogant or cruel. He used his resources to help others. And he'd been vulnerable enough to admit he just wanted to be seen for who he was, not what he had. Tessa could understand that. She'd spent her whole life being underestimated because she didn't have money or connections. She'd wanted people to see her for who she was too. Maybe that's what made them work together. They both understood what it meant to be invisible in different ways. And they both wanted to matter for the right reasons. As she drifted off to sleep, Tessa felt grateful. For the jacket she'd offered on a cold night. For the twist of fate that had brought Julian into her life. For the courage to accept help when it was offered. Her mother had been right. Pride didn't feed your soul. But hope did. And love, in whatever form it took, always found a way. Saturday morning arrived with the first snow of the season, light flurries that made the city look softer and cleaner. Tessa met Julian at the old community center, a brick building that had sat empty for 3 years. Rebecca Cole was there too, along with an architect named George Patterson and a contractor named Luis Rodriguez. They all shook hands, and Tessa felt grateful that Julian had assembled a team to help make this happen. The building was bigger than Tessa had expected. 2 stories with large rooms that could be converted into reading areas, classroom spaces, and a computer lab. The bones were good, though it clearly needed work. "The roof needs replacing," Luis said, making notes on his clipboard. "Plumbing and electrical will need updating. But the structure is solid." George pulled out blueprints and started explaining possibilities. "We could open up this wall here to create a large main room. Add floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Create a children's section with low shelves and cozy reading nooks." Tessa walked through the empty space, her mind filling with images. Children sitting on beanbags reading picture books. Teenagers doing homework at tables. Adults attending GED classes or book clubs. A place that smelled like books and coffee and possibility. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking it's perfect," Tessa said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can see it all so clearly. Then let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, the project moved forward with surprising speed. Julian's team was efficient and dedicated. George finalized designs. Luis began demolition and renovation. Rebecca worked on permits and community outreach. And Tessa was involved in every decision. She chose paint colors. Warm yellows for the children's section, soft blues for the main reading room, deep green for the study areas. She selected furniture. Comfortable chairs, sturdy tables, bean bags and bright colors. She started building a collection, accepting book donations and purchasing new titles. Julian took her to meetings with his board of directors, introducing her as the library's founder and director. The board members were impressed by her vision and commitment. One woman, Patricia Myers, offered to fund an annual scholarship program for local students. "I grew up without access to books," Patricia said. "I want to make sure other kids don't face that same limitation." Tessa accepted the offer with gratitude, shaking Patricia's hand warmly. Through all of this, her relationship with Julian deepened. They had dinner together several times a week, sometimes at fancy restaurants, sometimes at small neighborhood places Tessa introduced him to. He attended a bookstore event with her, buying an embarrassing number of books. She went to a charity gala with him, wearing a beautiful blue dress he'd insisted on buying for her. "You can't show up to these things in your work clothes," he'd said gently when she protested. "Let me do this for you." And Tessa had learned to say yes, to accept help, to recognize that Julian gave because he wanted to, not because he expected anything in return. One evening about 6 weeks after they'd met, they sat in his penthouse after dinner. Snow fell outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the city lights blur and sparkle. "Can I ask you something?" Tessa said. "Anything." "That night at the bus stop, you said you'd lost something important. What was it?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "My perspective, I think. I'd been so focused on profits and growth and beating competitors that I'd forgotten why I started Hartley Industries in the first place. My parents were immigrants. They worked 3 jobs between them to give my sister and me opportunities. When I made my first million, I promised myself I'd use that money to help other families like mine. But somewhere along the way I got caught up in the game of business. Making more money just to make more money. And now I remember. You reminded me." He took her hand. "Every time I see you light up talking about the library, I remember why wealth matters. It's not about having the biggest house or the fanciest car. It's about having the power to make real change in people's lives." Tessa squeezed his hand. "You're a good person, Julian Hartley." "I'm trying to be. You make me want to be better." They kissed and it felt like coming home. The library renovation continued through December. The neighborhood started paying attention. People would stop by to see the progress, to ask when it would open, to offer help. A group of retired teachers volunteered to run homework help programs. A local businessman donated computers. The high school art class painted a mural on one wall depicting children reading under a tree. The community was investing in the library just as Julian had invested his money. Everyone was building it together. Tessa invited Julian to her apartment for the first time in mid-December. She was nervous about him seeing where she lived, the small space that was a universe away from his penthouse. But Julian walked in and smiled. "This is cozy," he said, looking at her bookshelf crammed with paperbacks, her mismatched furniture, the photos of her mother on the wall. "It feels like you." They made dinner together in her tiny kitchen, Julian following her instructions for spaghetti and meatballs. They ate at her small table, knees touching, and talked about everything and nothing. "My mom wants to meet you," Tessa said. "She's heard all about you in the library. I'd love to meet her. She's very protective. She'll probably interrogate you. I look forward to it." The next week, Tessa brought Julian to Sunday dinner at her mother's house in Queens. Angela Washington was a strong woman in her late 50s, with graying hair and eyes that saw everything. She welcomed Julian warmly, but Tessa caught the assessing looks her mother gave him throughout the meal. After dinner, while Tessa was in the kitchen getting dessert, she heard her mother's voice from the living room. "You care about my daughter?" "Very much, Mrs. Washington." "Good. Because she's special. She has the biggest heart of anyone I know, and if you hurt her, you'll answer to me. I don't care how much money you have." "I understand. And I promise I'll never hurt her intentionally. She means everything to me." When Tessa returned with the pie, both Julian and her mother were smiling. Her mother gave her a subtle nod of approval, and Tessa felt warmth spread through her chest. After they left in the car heading back to the city, Julian said, "I like your mom. She likes you too. That interrogation means she approves." "Good. Because I intend to be around for a long time." Tessa felt her heart skip. Yeah. As Christmas approached, the library was nearly finished. The shelves were being installed. The furniture was being delivered. Books were being cataloged and organized. It was really happening. Tessa had decided to name it the Washington Community Library, after her mother. When she told Angela, her mother cried. "You don't have to do that, baby. I want to. You taught me to help others. You taught me that knowledge is power. This library exists because of those lessons." Julian threw a small Christmas party at his penthouse, inviting Tessa and the entire library team. Rebecca brought her husband. George brought his wife. Luis brought his teenage daughter. Patricia Myers came with her partner. They toasted to the library's success, to community, to dreams becoming reality. Late in the evening, Julian pulled Tessa aside onto his private terrace. The city sprawled below them, decorated with Christmas lights. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small box. Tessa's heart raced. The box was too big for a ring, thank goodness. They weren't ready for that yet. Inside was a key on a silver chain. "It's the key to the library," Julian explained. "I had it made special. It's yours, Tessa. Your dream. Your creation. I just helped make it possible." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. "Julian, thank you. For everything. Thank you for letting me be part of it. For accepting my help. For seeing me as Julian, not just as a billionaire." They stood together in the cold December air, the city lights twinkling around them, and Tessa felt grateful for a cold November night, a bus stop, and a decision to offer her jacket to a stranger. That one act of kindness had changed everything. And it was only the beginning. The Washington Community Library opened its doors on January 15th, a cold but clear Saturday morning. The neighborhood turned out in numbers that exceeded Tessa's hopes. Families, teenagers, elderly residents, everyone came to see the transformation of the old community center. The building looked beautiful. Fresh paint, new windows, a hand-painted sign above the door that read Washington Community Library, where stories come alive. Inside, the shelves were full of books organized by category. The children's section had colorful murals and cozy reading nooks. The main room had comfortable chairs and tables perfect for studying. The computer lab gleamed with new equipment. Tessa stood at the entrance, wearing a red dress Julian had insisted on buying for the occasion, greeting everyone who entered. Her mother stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Angela whispered. Julian had invited local press, and several reporters wandered through taking photos and conducting interviews. But he stayed in the background, letting Tessa have the spotlight. At noon, they held an official ribbon-cutting ceremony. The local councilman, Marcus Henderson, gave a speech about community investment. Patricia Myers spoke about the importance of education access. And then Tessa took the microphone. "This library exists because a lot of people believed in it," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But it really exists because of one person's kindness. Julian Hartley could have used his resources for anything. But he chose to invest in this neighborhood, in this dream. And I will spend every day making sure that investment pays off by changing lives, one book at a time." The crowd applauded. Julian smiled at her from the second row, and she felt her heart swell with affection for him. After the ceremony, people flooded in. Children ran to the picture books. Teenagers claimed spots at the computers. Adults browsed the fiction section. The retired teachers who'd volunteered started homework help sessions. The coffee station Julian had insisted on installing stayed busy all day. By the time they closed at 6, over 300 people had visited. Tessa was exhausted but elated. "It's a success," Rebecca said, hugging her. "An absolute success." That night, Julian took Tessa to dinner at a quiet restaurant to celebrate. She was too tired to go anywhere fancy, so they went to a neighborhood Italian place where the food was good and the atmosphere was relaxed. "You did it," Julian said, raising his glass of water. "You created something beautiful." "We did it," Tessa corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you. You would have found a way. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe it would have looked different, but you would have made it happen. That's who you are." Over the next few weeks, the library became the heart of the neighborhood. Kids came every day after school. Book clubs formed. English language classes started for recent immigrants. Job search workshops helped people update resumes and practice interviews. Tessa hired 3 part-time staff members to help run things. She trained volunteers. She built relationships with local schools and community organizations. The library became more than just a place to borrow books. It became a gathering place, a safe haven, a center of hope. Julian was proud of her, she could see it in his eyes every time he visited. And he visited often, sometimes just to bring her coffee, sometimes to help shelve books, sometimes to sit quietly and read while she worked. Their relationship continued to deepen. They spent most evenings together now, either at his place or hers. They talked about everything: childhood memories, future dreams, their hopes and fears. Tessa met Julian's sister, Natalie, a sharp-witted lawyer who immediately liked Tessa. "You're good for him," Natalie told Tessa over lunch one Saturday. "He smiles more now. Seems lighter. That's because of you." In February, Julian asked Tessa to attend a business gala with him. It was a major event, with influential business leaders from across the country attending. "I want you there with me," Julian said. "I want everyone to see the woman who inspires me." Tessa felt nervous but agreed. Julian took her shopping, and they found a stunning blue gown that made her feel like royalty. Her mother helped her with her hair and makeup, creating an elegant updo that showed off Tessa's features. The gala was at a grand hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Round tables covered in white linens filled the space. A live orchestra played soft music. Everyone wore tuxedos and designer gowns. Tessa felt out of place for about 5 minutes. Then Julian took her hand and said, "You're the most beautiful woman here. Just be yourself. That's all I need." So she did. She smiled and shook hands and made conversation. When people asked what she did, she told them about the library with passion and pride. Several business leaders seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about the programs and impact. One woman, CEO of a major publishing house, pulled Tessa aside. "I'd like to donate books to your library. 1,000 titles of your choosing. And I'd like to set up a partnership for author visits." Tessa accepted with gratitude, shaking the woman's hand enthusiastically. By the end of the night, the library had received 3 major partnership offers, 2 scholarship fund commitments and countless expressions of support. "See," Julian said as they danced slowly to the orchestra. "You belong in any room you enter. Because you have something more valuable than money or status. You have genuine passion for making the world better." "You give me too much credit," Tessa said. "I don't give you enough." They swayed together and Tessa realized something important. She wasn't intimidated anymore. Not by Julian's wealth or his world or the influential people surrounding them. She had her own power. Her own influence. Her own way of making a difference. Julian had helped her build the library, yes. But she had created the vision. She ran it. She made it successful. And that success was opening doors she never thought possible. If you've been touched by Tessa's journey so far, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to see how love and opportunity continue to transform her life. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness creates the biggest ripples. What would you do if someone offered to help you achieve your biggest dream? In March, Tessa was invited to speak at a conference about community development. She almost declined, feeling unqualified, but Julian encouraged her. "You have a success story worth sharing. Other communities could learn from what you've built." So she went. And she spoke to a room of 200 community organizers about the Washington Community Library. About starting with a dream and accepting help when it was offered. About building partnerships and engaging the neighborhood. About measuring success not in numbers but in changed lives. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Afterward, a dozen people approached her wanting to know more, wanting guidance for their own projects. "You're becoming influential," Julian said that evening. "People listen when you speak." "That's weird." "That's wonderful." As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and longer days, Tessa reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few months. She'd met Julian, built the library, gained confidence, and discovered her own power to make a difference. But more than all of that, she'd fallen in love. Not with Julian's money or status, but with him. With his kindness and his vision and the way he looked at her like she was extraordinary. And he'd fallen in love with her too. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, feel it in his touch. Neither of them had said the words yet. But Tessa knew they were both thinking them. Soon, she told herself. Soon they'd say what they both already knew. For now, it was enough to walk through the library seeing children discover new books, adults learn new skills, a community coming together. To know that kindness and hope and love in all its forms were changing lives every single day. Including hers. Spring brought cherry blossoms to the city, decorating the streets with pink and white petals. It also brought a milestone. Tessa's library had been open for 3 months and had served over 5,000 visitors. The local newspaper ran a feature story with photos of children reading and quotes from neighborhood residents. Tessa was named Community Hero of the Month. Her mother bought 20 copies of the newspaper and sent them to relatives. Julian framed 1 copy and hung it in his office at Hartley Industries. "My girlfriend, the community hero," he told his executives during a board meeting, pointing to the article. "This is what real success looks like." Tessa didn't know he'd done that until Natalie mentioned it over coffee. "He's so proud of you," Julian's sister said. "It's actually kind of adorable. He shows everyone that article. I think his whole company has seen it by now." "That's embarrassing," Tessa said, but she was smiling. "That's love," Natalie corrected gently. The word hung in the air between them. Well, was that what this was? Tessa knew how she felt. She'd known for weeks now. But saying it out loud felt significant. "Scary. Wonderful. Has he said it?" Natalie asked. "Not yet. He will. So, I can tell." That evening, Julian picked Tessa up from the library. They were going to dinner, nothing fancy, just the Vietnamese restaurant they both loved. But first, Julian had a surprise. "Close your eyes," he said as they drove. "What? Why?" "Just trust me," Tessa closed her eyes. She felt the car make several turns, heard city sounds through the window, and then the car stopped. Okay, open them. They were at a park. Not just any park, but the one where they'd walked after their first dinner together. The place where Julian had first offered to help her with the library. Come on, he said, taking her hand. They walked along the same path they'd walked months ago. But this time, it was spring instead of November. This time, flowers bloomed and birds sang and the world felt alive with possibility. Julian led her to a particular spot under a large oak tree. Someone had placed a blanket there, along with a picnic basket and flowers. Julian, what is this? Sit with me, he said. They sat on the blanket and Julian opened the basket. Inside were all of Tessa's favorite foods: strawberries, cheese, crackers, chocolate. A thermos of hot cocoa, even though the weather was warm, because Tessa loved hot cocoa. You did all this? She asked. I wanted to do something special for you. To celebrate the library, yes, but also to celebrate us. Us, Tessa repeated softly. Tessa, these past few months have been the best of my life. You've changed everything for me. Made me remember what really matters. Made me a better person. Made me happier than I knew I could be. Julian. Let me finish, he said gently. That night at the bus stop, when you gave me your jacket, you gave me more than warmth. You gave me hope. You reminded me that good people still exist. That kindness still matters. And then you let me into your life, into your dream, and you've given me purpose beyond just making money. Tears pricked Tessa's eyes. You've given me so much too. The library, yes, but also confidence. Belief in myself. A sense of possibility I never had before. We've given each other gifts, Julian agreed. He took her hands in his. And I want to keep giving you gifts. Keep sharing dreams. Keep building a life together. Because Tessa Washington, I love you. I'm completely, entirely, deeply in love with you. Tessa felt her breath catch. There it was. The words she'd been waiting to hear. I love you too, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I've loved you for a while now. I was just waiting for the right moment to say it. Is this the right moment? This is perfect. Julian leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet, under the oak tree in the spring sunshine. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying happy tears. They spent the next hour on that blanket, feeding each other strawberries and talking about their future. What it might look like. Where it might lead. I want you to move in with me, Julian said. Not because I think you should give up your independence or because my place is nicer. But because I want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Because being apart feels wrong now. Tessa thought about her small apartment that she'd called home for 3 years. It held good memories. But Julian was right. Being apart did feel wrong. Okay, she said. Yes. I'll move in with you. Really? Really? Julian picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like teenagers. Over the next few weeks, Tessa packed up her apartment. She donated furniture she didn't need. Boxed up books to bring to Julian's place. Said goodbye to her little home that had served her well. Her mother helped her pack, offering advice and stories. You know, Angela said, carefully wrapping dishes in newspaper, when you gave that man your jacket, I thought you were being too kind. Too trusting. I worried about you. I know, Mom. But I was wrong. Your kindness brought you exactly what you deserved. A man who sees your worth. A life full of possibility. Love. Angela smiled. You were right to trust your heart. Moving day was chaotic but fun. Julian hired movers, but he insisted on helping personally. He carried boxes, arranged books on his shelves to make room for Tessa's, and gave her half his enormous closet. This is your home now too, he said. I want you to feel comfortable changing anything you want. Tessa did make changes. She added color to the mostly neutral penthouse. A red throw blanket on the couch. Green curtains in the bedroom. Photos of her mother and friends on the walls. Plants by the windows because she loved greenery. Julian loved every change. It feels more like a home now, he told her. It feels like us. Living together was an adjustment, but a happy one. They learned each other's routines. Tessa discovered Julian was an early riser who liked to work out at dawn. Julian learned Tessa loved to read in bed before sleeping. They navigated bathroom schedules and closet space and whose turn it was to cook. But mostly they just enjoyed being together. Coming home to each other. Cooking dinner side by side. Falling asleep tangled together. Waking up and seeing each other's face first thing. The library continued to thrive. Tessa hired a manager to help with day-to-day operations, which gave her time to focus on expanding programs and building partnerships. She started a summer reading program for kids. She launched a job skills training program for adults. She created a book club that met every Thursday evening. Julian sometimes joined that book club, and watching him discuss novels with community members made Tessa love him even more. In June, they celebrated their 6-month anniversary by taking a weekend trip to a beach house Julian owned upstate. They spent 3 days doing nothing but reading, walking on the beach and talking about everything and nothing. On the last evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, Julian said, "I want to spend my life with you." "We are spending our life together," Tessa pointed out. "I mean officially. Forever. Married." Tessa's heart skipped. "Are you proposing?" "Not yet. But I'm telling you my intentions. When I do propose, I want you to know it's coming from a place of absolute certainty. I know you're the one. I've known since that night at the bus stop, if I'm honest." "I know you're the one too," Tessa said softly. Yeah. They held each other as the sun set and the waves crashed against the shore, and Tessa felt peace settle over her. This was her life now. Love and possibility and dreams coming true. She'd offered a jacket to a stranger and he'd offered her the world. She'd accepted. And it was the best decision she'd ever made. By August, the Washington Community Library had become so successful that Tessa faced a good problem. They were running out of space. The building that had seemed enormous 6 months ago now felt crowded during peak hours. "We need to expand," she told Julian over breakfast one morning. "But I don't know how. We're using every inch of the building." Julian poured her more coffee, thinking, what if we opened a second location? In another underserved neighborhood? Tessa's eyes widened. Could we do that? Why not? You've proven the model works. You've got community support, partnerships with schools and organizations, volunteers ready to help. Why not replicate it? The idea excited and terrified Tessa in equal measure. Running one library was challenging enough. 2 seemed almost impossible. But Julian believed in her. And she'd learned to believe in herself. They started planning. Rebecca helped identify potential neighborhoods. George drew up preliminary designs. Patricia Myers offered to increase her scholarship fund to cover both locations. "This is what investment looks like," Patricia told Tessa at a planning meeting. "You take something successful and you grow it. You're creating a model that could eventually expand across the entire city." The second library would be called the Angela Washington Branch, honoring Tessa's mother. When Tessa told Angela, her mother couldn't speak for 5 minutes. She just cried and hugged Tessa tight. "You're going to change so many lives, baby," Angela finally managed. "I'm so proud of you." Tessa threw herself into the new project while still managing the original library. She worked long hours, sometimes not getting home until late at night. Julian never complained. He brought her dinner when she worked late. He rubbed her shoulders when she was stressed. He reminded her to take breaks when she pushed herself too hard. "I don't want you to burn out," he said one night, finding her still working at 11 p.m. "The library is important, but your health is more important." "I know. I just want to make sure everything is perfect." "It will be. You know why? Because you're running it." His faith in her never wavered. Even when Tessa doubted herself, Julian's certainty kept her grounded. In September, the Angela Washington Branch held its grand opening. The turnout was even bigger than the first library. This neighborhood had been waiting for something like this, and residents showed up in force to support it. Tessa gave a speech thanking everyone who'd made the library possible. But she saved her biggest thanks for her mother. "Angela Washington taught me that education is power. That knowledge changes lives. That everyone deserves access to information and opportunity, regardless of their economic situation. This library carries her name because it carries her values. Mom, this is for you." Angela stood and waved to the crowd, tears streaming down her face. The audience gave her a standing ovation. After the ceremony, local news crews interviewed Tessa. One reporter asked, "What's next for the Washington Community Libraries?" Tessa glanced at Julian, who nodded encouragingly. "We're already planning a third location. And eventually, we hope to have a library in every underserved neighborhood in the city." The interview aired that evening and Tessa's phone exploded with messages. Community organizers from other neighborhoods wanted to know how they could get a Washington library. City officials reached out about potential partnerships. Other cities asked for guidance on replicating the model. "You're becoming famous," Natalie teased at Sunday brunch. "I'm becoming busy," Tessa corrected, but she was smiling. That night, exhausted but happy, Tessa curled up on the couch with Julian. They'd ordered takeout and were watching a movie, though Tessa kept dozing off. "You're tired," Julian observed. "I'm content," Tessa corrected. "There's a difference." "Are you happy?" Julian asked seriously. Really happy? Not just with the library but with everything. Tessa sat up and looked at him. Julian, I've never been happier in my life. I have work that matters. I have your support. I have love. What more could I possibly want? I just want to make sure. Because your life has changed so much in such a short time. I want to be sure it's what you really want, not just what happened to you. Tessa took his face in her hands. Listen to me. That night at the bus stop, I gave you my jacket because I saw someone who needed help. I had no idea it would lead to all this. But every single thing that's happened since then, every opportunity, every success, every moment with you I've chosen. I've said yes. I've accepted with gratitude. This isn't just what happened to me. This is the life I've chosen to build. Julian kissed her forehead. I needed to hear that. Why? Because I'm going to ask you something important soon, and I need to know you're choosing this life, not just going along with it. Tessa's heart raced. Julian? Not yet, he said with a smile. But not yet. In October, the two libraries held a joint book fair fundraiser. Local authors came to speak. Food trucks set up outside. Musicians performed. It was part celebration, part fundraiser, part community event. Over 2,000 people attended. The libraries raised enough money to fund operations for 6 months. Standing in the middle of the crowd, watching children run between booths with new books in their hands, watching adults browsing the used book sales, watching the community come together, Tessa felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Julian found her and took her hand. This is amazing. This is everything I dreamed of. And more. You did this. You made this happen. We made this happen, Tessa corrected. Together. Together, Julian agreed. Always together. As autumn deepened and the leaves turned gold and red, Tessa felt like her life had found its rhythm. She ran the libraries with confidence. She lived with Julian in love and partnership. She visited her mother weekly. She maintained her friendship with Candace. She balanced work and personal life better than she ever had. Everything felt right. Everything felt perfect. She should have known that perfect moments don't last forever. Because change was coming. A challenge was approaching. And Tessa would have to make a choice that would test everything she believed about love, trust, and her own worth. But for now, in these golden October days, she was simply happy. And that was enough. November arrived, bringing cold winds and the 1-year anniversary of the night Tessa met Julian at the bus stop. They planned to celebrate quietly, just the two of them, with dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first date. But the week before their anniversary, something unexpected happened. Tessa was at the original library organizing a new shipment of books, when a man in an expensive suit walked in. He was maybe 40, with silver streaks in his dark hair and an air of authority that made people step aside. Tessa Washington? He asked, extending his hand. I'm Richard Brennan. I wondered if I could speak with you privately. Tessa shook his hand, confused. Do I know you? No, but you know Julian Hartley. I'm a business associate of his. Could we talk in your office? Something about his tone made Tessa uneasy, but she led him to the small office at the back of the library. Richard sat across from her desk, looking around at the simple space. Congratulations on your success here, he said. 2 libraries in less than a year. That's impressive. Thank you. What can I do for you, Mr. Brennan? I'll be direct. I'm concerned about Julian. About his recent decisions regarding resource allocation. I don't understand. Richard leaned forward. Julian has invested substantial amounts in these libraries. Money that could have been used for other projects. More profitable projects. His board is starting to question his judgment. Tessa felt her stomach tighten. Julian never told me any of that. Of course he didn't. He's in love with you. Love makes people do foolish things. Richard pulled out a folder. I've done some research on you, Tessa. You're a good person. You really do care about helping people. But you have to see the reality of the situation. What situation? Julian started dating you right after these libraries became public projects. His company's image improved significantly. Positive press. Community awards. Social responsibility recognition. Richard slid the folder across the desk. It's all in there. The correlation between his relationship with you and his company's public perception. Tessa didn't want to open the folder, but she did. Inside were news articles, financial reports, social media analytics. All showing that Julian's public image had indeed improved dramatically since he'd started the library project and since photos of him and Tessa together started appearing in local papers. What are you saying? Tessa asked, though she was afraid she already knew. I'm saying that it's quite convenient. The struggling business mogul meets the charitable bookstore clerk. He helps her achieve her dreams. They fall in love. It's a great story. Great publicity. But Tessa, you have to ask yourself, is it real? Or is it just good business? That's ridiculous. Julian wouldn't. Wouldn't he? Richard stood. Look, I'm not saying he's a bad person. I'm saying he's a businessman. And businessmen use the resources available to them. You're a resource. A valuable one. These libraries generate goodwill. Dating you makes him look like a good guy. It's smart strategy. Tessa felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of this man. Why are you telling me this? Because I care about Julian. We've been competitors for years, yes, but I respect him. And I think this charade is beneath him. He's going to blow up eventually. Better to end it now before more damage is done. He pulled out a check and placed it on her desk. This is for you. $500,000. Take it. Walk away. Let Julian focus on his real work instead of this public relations project. Tessa stared at the check. $500,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. Get out, she said quietly. Tessa, be reasonable. Get out of my library. Now. Richard picked up the check slowly. You're making a mistake. When this all falls apart, remember that I tried to help you. After he left, Tessa sat in her office for a long time, staring at the folder. Her hands shook. Her mind raced. She wanted to dismiss everything Richard had said as lies. The bitter words of a jealous competitor. But doubt had taken root. A small, poisonous seed that whispered questions. What if he's right? What if Julian just sees you as good publicity? What if this whole year has been a strategy? She thought about all the times Julian had introduced her to important people. How he'd always made sure photographers were nearby. How he'd framed that newspaper article in his office. How his company's image had improved so dramatically. No, that couldn't be right. Julian loved her. He'd said so. She'd felt it. But what if she'd been fooling herself? What if she'd been so eager to believe in a fairy tale that she'd missed the reality? Tessa picked up her phone to call Julian, then put it down. She needed to think. To process. To figure out what she believed. She left the library early, telling her staff she wasn't feeling well. At home in the penthouse, she walked through the rooms she'd come to think of as hers. The couch where she read every evening. The kitchen where they cooked together. The bedroom where they fell asleep tangled together. Was any of it real? Julian came home at 6, carrying flowers. Hey beautiful, I thought we could. Tessa? What's wrong? She was sitting on the couch, the folder on the coffee table in front of her. Richard Brennan came to see me today, she said. Julian's face went pale. What did he want? To tell me the truth about us. About why you're really with me. Her voice cracked. About how I'm just good publicity for your company. Tessa, no. That's not. Julian sat down across from her. That's not true. Whatever he told you, it's not true. Then explain these. She gestured to the folder. Explain why your company's image improved so much after we started dating. Explain why you always made sure there were photographers. At our events. Explain why you framed that newspaper article about me in your office where everyone could see it. Those things happened, yes, but not for the reasons you're thinking. Julian reached for her hands, but she pulled away. Tessa, please. Let me explain. So explain. Julian took a deep breath. Yes, the libraries have been good for my company's image. Yes, dating you has made me look like a better person in the public eye. Those are facts. But they're not the reasons for any of it. The libraries exist because you dreamed them and I had the resources to help. I introduced you to important people because I wanted them to see what you'd created. I framed that article because I'm proud of you. Not because it helps my business, but because I love you. How do I know that's true? Because I'm going to prove it to you. Julian stood and went to his home office. He came back with legal documents. These are the transfer papers for both libraries. I had them drawn up last month. I was going to give them to you on our anniversary, but I'll show you now. I'm signing both buildings over to you. Full ownership. They're yours. No conditions. No strings attached. Even if you walked out that door right now and I never saw you again, those libraries would still be yours. Tessa stared at the papers. Why would you do that? Because they're your dream, not mine. Because I was only ever supposed to help you build them, not own them. And because I need you to know that my love for you has nothing to do with business or publicity or anything except the fact that you're the best person I've ever met. Richard offered me $500,000 to leave you. Julian's jaw clenched. Did you take it? Of course not. I told him to get out. Why? Because. Tessa felt tears finally fall. Because even with all this doubt, even with all these questions, I know one thing for certain. I love you. I love you so much it scares me. And I don't want his money. I don't want anything except for this to be real. Julian crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. It's real, Tessa. It's the most real thing in my life. That night at the bus stop, when you gave me your jacket, I wasn't thinking about publicity or business strategy. I was thinking that I'd just met someone extraordinary. Someone kind and generous and beautiful inside and out. Everything that's happened since then, every moment we've shared, it's all been real. How do I know Richard won't be right? How do I know this won't all fall apart? Because I'm going to ask you something right now and I want you to really hear me when I ask it. Julian pulled back and looked into her eyes. Tessa Washington, will you marry me? Tessa's breath caught. What? I was going to do this at dinner on our anniversary. I had a whole plan. But I need you to know right now, this minute, that I want to spend my life with you. Not for publicity. Not for business. For love. Because you make me better. Because I can't imagine a future without you in it. Because you're my home. Julian? You don't have to answer now. Take time to think about it. Think about everything that's happened. Think about every moment we've shared. Think about whether you believe in us. Tessa looked at this man who had helped her achieve her dreams. Who had supported her without trying to control her. Who had given her space to grow while standing beside her every step of the way. She thought about the jacket she'd offered on a cold November night. About how that single act of kindness had led to this moment. She thought about Richard's accusations and the doubt they'd planted. But more than that, she thought about the years she'd spent with Julian. The laughter. The conversations. The way he looked at her like she mattered. The way he transferred ownership of the libraries before she'd even asked. And she realized something important. Trust wasn't about never doubting. It was about choosing to believe despite doubt. It was about looking at the evidence of someone's actions and deciding what was true. Julian's actions spoke louder than Richard's words ever could. I don't need time to think about it, Tessa said. The answer is yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Because I believe in us. Because I trust you. Because I love you. Julian let out a breath that sounded like relief and joy mixed together. He kissed her and it felt like coming home. Later that night, after they'd talked for hours, after Tessa had signed the library transfer papers and Julian had put a ring on her finger, they lay in bed together. I'm sorry Richard tried to poison what we have, Julian said quietly. I'm glad he did, Tessa replied. What? Why? Because it made me really examine what I believe. It made me choose you actively, not just passively accept what was happening. And choosing you, knowing all the facts, understanding the reality, that feels more powerful than just drifting along. Julian pulled her closer. You're wise, you know that? I'm learning. Tessa looked at her engagement ring, a simple but beautiful diamond on a platinum band. When did you buy this? 2 months ago. I've been carrying it around, waiting for the perfect moment. This wasn't the perfect moment. No, but it was the right one. Tessa agreed. Sometimes the right moments weren't perfect. Sometimes they came with doubt and challenge and difficult conversations. But those moments were often more meaningful because they were hard-won. She'd chosen Julian. He'd chosen her. And together they'd face whatever challenges came next. Because that's what love was. Not just feeling good together on easy days but choosing each other on the hard days too. And this, Tessa realized, was just the beginning of their story together. The Washington Community Libraries celebrated their 1-year anniversary with a city-wide event. All 3 libraries, the third having opened just last month, hosted readings, workshops, and celebrations. Over 5,000 people attended throughout the day. Mayor Sarah Jackson gave a speech about community investment. The libraries had served over 20,000 unique visitors in their first year. Graduation rates had improved in the neighborhoods they served. Employment had increased. Test scores had gone up. The numbers were impressive, but what mattered more to Tessa were the stories. The single mother who'd gotten her GED through library classes and was now enrolled in community college. The teenage boy who discovered a love of poetry and was now published in a literary magazine. The elderly man who'd made new friends at the weekly book club after years of loneliness. These stories were why the libraries existed. These changed lives were the real measure of success. Tessa stood at the podium in the original Washington Community Library, the place where it had all started, and looked out at the crowd. Her mother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Julian sat beside her, his hand holding Angela's. Candace was there with her family. Rebecca and the entire Hartley Industries team. Patricia Myers and her scholarship students. The volunteers who'd given countless hours. A year ago, Tessa said, her voice carrying through the quiet room, I was just a bookstore clerk with a dream. I wanted to create spaces where everyone, regardless of their economic situation, could access books and knowledge and community. I thought it was an impossible dream. But then I learned something important. She paused, catching Julian's eye. He smiled at her encouragingly. I learned that impossible is just another word for not yet possible. I learned that kindness opens doors. That accepting help isn't weakness but wisdom. That believing in yourself is the first step to achieving anything. And I learned that when you build something with love and hope and purpose, the community will rise to support it. The audience applauded. Tessa waited for quiet before continuing. These libraries belong to all of us. They exist because so many people believed in the vision and contributed their time, money, and energy. They're here because a community decided that knowledge and connection matter. And they'll continue to exist and grow because we're all committed to making them succeed. She glanced down at her engagement ring, still new enough to catch her eye. I've been asked what's next for the Washington libraries. The answer is we keep growing. We keep serving. We keep changing lives. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. More applause. Tessa stepped down from the podium and people rushed to congratulate her. She shook hands, accepted hugs, posed for photos. Julian found her in the crowd and pulled her aside. You were amazing. I'm exhausted, she admitted. This has been the longest, best day. Come on. I have one more surprise for you. They slipped out the back door and Julian's driver was waiting. 20 minutes later, they were at the park where Julian had first told Tessa he loved her. The same oak tree. The same spot. But this time it wasn't just the two of them. Under the tree stood their families and closest friends. Candace and her husband. Natalie and her girlfriend. Angela, wiping tears from her eyes already. Mr. Peterson from the bookstore. Rebecca and George and Louise. And standing in front of them all was a minister Tessa recognized from her mother's church. Julian, what is this? He took her hands. Tessa Washington, I know we're already engaged. I know we were planning a wedding for next year. But I realized something today watching you give that speech, seeing how much you've accomplished, how much you've grown. I don't want to wait. I want to marry you right now. Today. If you'll have me. Tessa looked at the people gathered under the tree. Everyone she loved most in the world. They were all smiling, all crying happy tears, all waiting. You planned this? She asked. Your mom helped, Julian admitted. And Candace. And Natalie. Everyone here knows how we feel about each other. Everyone supports us. So why wait? Let's start our forever today. Tessa thought about the plan they'd made. The big wedding next fall. The venue they'd booked. The months of preparation still ahead. Then she thought about what she'd learned this year. That plans change. That the best moments are often unplanned. That saying yes to opportunity, to help, to love was always the right choice. Okay, she said, laughing through tears. Yes, let's do this. Let's get married right now. The ceremony was simple and perfect. Tessa wore the blue dress she'd worn to the library event. Julian wore his suit. They stood under the oak tree where he'd first told her he loved her, and they promised to love each other forever. Angela cried through the entire ceremony. Candace served as maid of honor, though she kept laughing and saying, I can't believe you're doing this. Natalie stood up with Julian, grinning like the cat who'd gotten the cream. When the minister said, You may kiss your bride, Julian pulled Tessa close and kissed her like it was the first time and the 1000th time all at once. I love you, Mrs. Hartley, he whispered against her lips. I love you too, Tessa whispered back. They had an impromptu reception at Julian's penthouse. Someone ordered pizza and Chinese food. Someone else brought champagne. They danced to music from someone's phone. They laughed and told stories and celebrated love in all its messy, beautiful glory. Late that night, after everyone had left and it was just Tessa and Julian alone in their home, they stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city. We're married, Tessa said, still trying to make it feel real. We're married, Julian confirmed. How do you feel? Happy, scared, excited, complete. She turned to face him. A year ago I gave you my jacket because you were cold. I never imagined it would lead to this. To marriage and libraries and a completely different life. Do you regret it? Any of it? Not for a second. Tessa meant it. Yes, the journey had been overwhelming sometimes. Yes, she'd faced doubts and challenges. But every choice had been hers to make and she'd chosen love. Chosen hope. Chosen to believe in possibility. I have something for you, Julian said. He pulled out an envelope. Your wedding present. Inside was a single piece of paper. Tessa read it once, then again, unable to believe what she was seeing. You're funding libraries in 10 more cities? I'm funding buildings and startup costs, Julian corrected. You're going to lead the project. Train others to replicate what you've done here. Create a nationwide network of community libraries. The Washington Library Foundation. Julian, that's enormous. You're ready for it. You've proven you can do this. Why stop at 3 libraries when you could change the entire country? Tessa thought about all the neighborhoods and all the cities that lacked access to books and resources. She thought about the children who could discover reading, the adults who could learn new skills, the communities that could come together. Yes, she said. Yes, let's do it. They sealed the agreement with a kiss, and Tessa felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Not just for the money or the opportunity, but for this man who believed in her, who supported her dreams while letting her lead, who loved her not despite her humble beginnings but because of who she was as a person. Over the next few weeks, word of their surprise wedding spread through their community. People thought it was romantic and spontaneous and perfect. Tessa's library staff threw them a reception. The neighborhood organized a block party in their honor. The Washington Library Foundation began taking shape. Tessa assembled a team. They developed training materials. They reached out to community organizers in other cities. The project grew from a dream to a plan to a reality. 6 months after their wedding, the first new Washington library opened in Philadelphia. 6 months after that, another opened in Atlanta. Then Detroit. Then Phoenix. Each library followed the same model Tessa had created. Community-focused, volunteer-supported, program-rich. Each one became the heart of its neighborhood just as the original 3 had. Tessa traveled to help launch each one, but she always came home to Julian, to their life together in the city where it all started. 3 years after that cold November night at the bus stop, Tessa and Julian sat at their kitchen table going over plans for library number 25. She was pregnant now, 7 months, along with a daughter they'd already named Hope. We're going to need a bigger place, Julian said, his hand on Tessa's belly. This one will need space to run around. Are you saying you want to leave the penthouse? I'm saying I want us to find a home together. Something that's ours from the beginning, not just mine that you moved into. They found a brownstone in a family-friendly neighborhood, not far from the original library. It had a backyard and extra bedrooms and space for the family they were building. On moving day, as boxes were being carried in, Tessa found the red jacket. The one she'd given Julian that cold night. She'd thought it was lost, but apparently Julian had kept it all this time. Why do you still have this? She asked, holding it up. Julian took the jacket gently. Because it represents the moment my life changed. The moment I met you. The moment I learned that kindness still exists in the world. I could never throw that away. Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. Pregnancy hormones made her cry easily, but this was different. This was remembering how far they'd come. I was so cold that winter, she said softly. I could barely afford to heat my apartment. I was working retail and dreaming of something more but having no idea how to get there. And then I met you and everything changed. You changed it, Julian corrected. You made the choices. You accepted help. You built the libraries. You created the foundation. I just provided resources. You provided the vision and the heart. We did it together, Tessa said. That's the truth. Neither of us could have done this alone. Baby Hope kicked hard and both of them felt it. They looked at each other and laughed. She's going to be strong, Julian said. She's going to be loved, Tessa added. And she's going to grow up knowing that kindness matters. That helping others matters. That dreams can come true if you're brave enough to pursue them. As the sun set on that moving day, painting their new home in golden light, Tessa thought about the journey that had brought her here. A bus stop. A jacket. A choice to help a stranger. That one act of kindness had changed everything. Had opened doors she'd never imagined. Had brought her love and purpose and a life beyond her wildest dreams. But more than that, it had taught her something important. Kindness creates ripples. One act of compassion can start a chain reaction that changes countless lives. She'd given a jacket to a cold stranger. That stranger had helped her build libraries. Those libraries had served thousands of people. Those people had gone on to help others. And now libraries were opening across the country, creating more ripples, helping more people, spreading more kindness. It was a beautiful cycle. An endless loop of good begetting more good. And it had all started with a simple choice on a cold November night. To see someone who needed help. To offer what she could. To believe that kindness mattered. Tessa had spent her whole life being told that people like her didn't get fairy tales. That poor girls from modest backgrounds didn't end up with billionaires. That dreams stayed dreams. But she'd learned something different. She'd learned that kindness is its own reward. That helping others creates connections that can change your life. That saying yes to opportunity even when it's scary is always worth it. She'd learned that happy endings weren't just for storybooks. They were for anyone brave enough to believe in them. As Julian's arms wrapped around her and their baby kicked between them, Tessa knew one thing for certain. This was her happy ending. Not because a billionaire had rescued her, but because she'd chosen to help someone, and that choice had led to everything good in her life. She'd offered a jacket to a stranger. And he'd offered her the world. And together they'd built something beautiful. Something lasting. Something that would continue to change lives long after they were gone. The Washington Libraries stood as monuments to what kindness could create. To what happened when someone with vision met someone with resources. To what love could build when it was based on mutual respect and shared values. Tessa Washington Hartley, once a bookstore clerk with big dreams, now ran a national foundation. But more importantly, she was loved and in love. She was happy. She was fulfilled. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And it had all started with a red jacket and a cold night and a choice to be kind. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. One act of compassion. One moment of generosity. One decision to help. Kindness, hope, and love had led the way. Just as they always should.